player I will be assessing is number 4 from Thomas Telford School, Alex Holland. He plays the centre-back position. After analysing his performance, I have identified his main strengths and weaknesses and divided these strengths and weaknesses into 3 categories: fitness, skills and tactics. After analysing his performance, I've identified his most prioritised weakness, and from this I have developed a action plan to help improve his biggest weakness, with the hope of it to sort of strengthen his play in the future. Firstly, the player's strengths. The first category is of these strengths is fitness. The first strength I noticed was the player's upper body strength. The player's size gives him an advantage over the smaller players on the pitch, and he often puts his body between opposing players and the ball, and he often also extends his arm out to sort of ward off players, but still in a legal, safe way. The second fitness strength I noted was the player's stamina. He plays for the entirety of the game, and he also does not make a great deal of cognitive mistakes either towards the end of the game, when many other players are getting quite fatigued both physically and mentally. And the final strength from the fitness side of things was the player's balance. He never or he doesn't lose posture or his stance when he receives contact from other players, and also when he lands after jumping up for a header, he stays on his feet and he rarely ever goes down. In fact, I don't think he ever sort of falls to the floor. He has very good balance. The theory side of these strengths, when it comes to his upper body strength, I used the concept of somatotypes to explain how he has an advantage over other people. His somatotype would be a mesomorph. A mesomorph is usually well built, with a high metabolism and very responsive muscle cells, that also recognises having wide shoulders, a relatively slim waist, quite thick muscular thighs. Whereas and a mesomorph is how I classified him, and this gives him quite a lot of size compared to some of the other players. This could be just because he's developed at an earlier age. Another somatotype, which quite a lot of the other players on the field were ectomorphs. Ectomorphs are distinct as being lean and quite long. They usually have difficulty building muscle and have quite narrow shoulders, narrow hips, can't really gain weight that easily. And finally, the third and final somatotype is an endomorph, and these are categorised as being quite big players, high body fat, and have sort of like a pear-shaped physique to them. And also, in terms of him extending his arm toward other players, I used the method of joint analysis, especially at the elbow, to basically analyse his movements. So the plane of movement here, down this plane of movement, is the frontal plane of movement, and the antagonist muscles would be the bicep brachii and the tricep brachii, or the antagonist pair of muscles, should I say. And the articulating bone would be the ulna, the radius and the humerus. The joint type in the elbow here would be a hinge joint, and the movement of extending his arm is extension. So yeah, that's the theory side of warding off players with his arm. In terms of stamina, I looked at this section in terms of theory, in terms of energy systems, and obviously performing mid to high intensity muscular activity for long periods of time, such as the game, would be the aerobic energy system. Aerobic glycolysis converts glucose to pyruvic acid, and in the presence of oxygen, there is no lactic acid buildup, and instead the pyruvic acid is catalysed by coenzyme A into acetyl-CoA, This process produces 2 moles of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the biological term for, I guess, an energy source. After this first aerobic glycolysis stage is the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle produces 2 more moles of ATP. And the final stage, the electron transport chain, produces 34 moles of ATP. Track back. The Krebs cycle occurs in the matrix of the mitochondria, the organelle inside all muscle cells, all cells in general, animal cells. And the electron transport chain, is what takes place in the cristae of the mitochondria. So overall, 38 moles of ATP are produced from this one process, and that was the stamina energy side of things. In terms of balance, simply a player's sort of his base width, the more points of contact a person or an object has with the ground, is an increase in reaction, which is the force at which a person exerts upwards from being on a flat surface. An increase in reaction leads to an increase in stability, basically. So that was the player's fitness strength. The second category of strengths, skills. The first skill I noticed was the player's throw-ins. Although being a centre back, he often, because of his size, he sometimes takes the throw-ins, whereas usually a full-back would usually take them or left or right mid, but he does it. He has good legal form, both feet on the ground, ball behind the head and throws it. He can throw the ball quite a long distance as well, which is why he was preferred in some situations to throw the ball. Another skill I saw was him clearing the ball, especially in areas around his own box. That's a good defensive technique. He clears the ball several times during the game. He doesn't really ever shy away or pull out, whereas some of the smaller players sometimes I saw were pulling out and shying away. And this was key in shutting down several attacks from the other team. The final skill I saw was the player's communication skills. He verbalises instructions to other defenders very well, and he shows good leadership of the back four of the defence. In terms of theory, throw-ins, I used lever systems to explain that. There are 3 class of levers: a first class, second class, and third class. The first class of lever involves effort, fulcrum, load, and this creates a lever system. And if you can think of a player's arms when he throws the ball, the effort, which is the first part, comes from the bicep and the triceps to generate the power. The fulcrum is the elbow joint, which is what the load and the effort sort of move along, which is here. And the load obviously is the ball. So if you think about it, a throw-in, so you've got the effort from the bicep and the tricep, fulcrum at the hinge joint in the elbow, and then the load obviously being the ball. So you have this motion. In terms of clearing the ball, the theory I used here was projectile motion and factors affecting distance travel by a projectile, the projectile being the ball obviously. The first factor is the speed of release. The greater the force applied to a projectile, the greater the change in momentum and therefore acceleration. And that this is also applied to Newton's second law. So basically, the harder he kicks it, the further the ball will travel. That's basic sort of logic. And also the angle of release from where the ball's kicked. 45 degrees is the optimum angle of release to maximise distance travelled. An angle higher than 45 degrees means it will accelerate vertically upwards and come straight back down, resulting in little horizontal distance covered. And a angle of release lower than 45 degrees, and means projectile will not reach a high enough height to gain sufficient velocity to travel however much a distance. And a football, being spherical, usually has a parabolic or symmetrical flight path. This is achieved due to the weight of the football being greater than the air resistance acting upon it. A shuttlecock, on the other hand, would create a non-parabolic flight path. So if you think a parabolic flight path is like this, and non-parabolic, which sort of be like that. So it's asymmetrical as opposed to symmetrical. And this is because the air resistance acting on the shuttlecock is greater than the weight of the shuttlecock, and that's why shuttlecock design is as it is, especially for badminton. In terms of the player's communication, the theory I use for this, the player shows a democratic leadership type. He clearly controls the defence from his centre-back position, but at the same time, all members of the team, especially the defence, partake and communicate the tactics of the team to one another. So that's a democratic leadership type, as opposed to an autocratic or a laissez-faire. Being a school football team captain probably means he was an emergent leader who has developed his leadership technique and rapport with his other teammates over time. He shows confidence in his communicative techniques. Sports confidence is the belief or degree of certainty people possess about their ability to be successful in sport. And this confidence in communication could be linked to perhaps a type A personality type, as he's showing quite high signs of extroversion, which is personality type A person. So they were the player's skill strengths, and the final category of strength is the player's tactics. He has, or at least he maintains a good defensive line. He holds good offside lines throughout the game. He also causes several offsides throughout the game, and he also gives his team sort of quite a good sense of security, being the leader back there. The second tactical strength is his zonal marking. He keeps good area of marking in relation to his other teammates, so he's not getting sucked over to one side rarely. He sort of stays in good position relative to his teammates. And the final strength in terms of tactics was his offensive play positioning. I noticed on corners especially, he uses his height and presence on corners to attract marking to himself. This allows other teammates to make plays, sort of the shorter players that wouldn't usually get much attention. So the attention going towards him means he's freeing up his other teammates to make plays. This can be seen at the Telford goal at 12 minutes and 3 seconds into the game. In terms of the theory on the tactical side, for both defensive line and zonal marking, they require a positive group or team dynamic. A group has a collective identity of people sharing a common purpose with structural communication patterns. The 4 stages of a group forming is forming, storming, norming, and performing. The forming stage is when team members meet for the first time, establish ground rules, formalities are preserved, and this would usually translate to his football teams, or the football team that he plays for, Telford, their first training session perhaps of the season. The next stage, storming, members start to communicate their feelings, but still view themselves as individuals rather than a larger group. They resist control by group leaders and sometimes show hostility, but not usually. And the developing of this team cohesion could be done through multiple training sessions over the course of the season. The third stage of group form is the norming stage. People make compromises and feel part of a team at this stage. You usually get quite a good sense of team cohesion, team rapport, and this could occur during pre-competition walkthroughs, especially before a game like this. And finally, the fourth and final stage is performing. This is when team works in an open and trusting atmosphere. Flexibility is key, and this is shown relatively well throughout this performance. The offensive play positioning side of the theory side of offensive play positioning of this player that this player shows. I used the idea of memory stores to sort of help utilise the knowledge of his advantage, especially in set-piece situations such as corners, which was shown in the first Telford goal. Past experiences and memories mean team can utilise player size to benefit the attack. The Atkinson and Schifrin multi-storm memory model consists of sensory memory, short-term memory and long-term memory, which are all interconnected. Sensory memory is the shortest element of the memory. It acts as a buffer for stimuli received through the five senses. Selective attention filters out filters out relevant information from irrelevant information. So a normal attacking gameplay involving the player using his size as an advantage, that would be relevant information, as opposed to irrelevant information, which could be the temperature that was that day, for instance. Short-term memory has a high capacity for holding, but not manipulating a small amount of information in mind in an active, readily available state for a short period of time. The short-term memory is transferred to the long-term memory by attention. Yep. And this, as this example would show, would be attention to the player's size in helping in the attack. And finally, long-term memory. This is the stage where informative knowledge is held indefinitely. It is defined in contrast to short-term memory and working memory, and can be maintained through rehearsal, which will benefit retrieval. And in this example's case, the knowledge that the player's size is a key factor in attacks will be used in future attacks, and that is perhaps what is used here, because utilising his size at the start of a game could mean that they've had previous success with using him, especially during corners. So that's the player's strengths. The next section, the player's weaknesses, is also split into fitness, skills and tactics. I'll start with the player's weaknesses in the fitness side of things. The first weakness for fitness is the player's speed. He is often outrun by attackers. He often also lets players run behind him as sort of an option for a pass, so he doesn't have very good catch-up speed. The player's agility is also quite low. He struggles to change direction of pace and speed, especially on counter-attacks, and he often gets beat by more athletic players. And finally, the player's muscular power in his lower body, so his legs, was also another weakness for the player's fitness is muscular power in his lower body, i.e. his legs. He occasionally misses headers due to weak muscular power in his legs. He cannot jump as high, so obviously if you think the more power you have in your legs, the higher you can jump. But obviously not being able to jump as high means you cannot connect with sort of headers as well. This can be seen at 13 minutes and 30 seconds into the game. In terms of the theory side of this, for speed, a lack of speed could be linked to a lack of fast twitch muscle fibers. Fast twitch muscle fibers contract quickly but get fatigued quickly. Fast twitch muscle fibers are involved with short distance sprints. Although lacking in this fiber type, his stamina, a strength earlier identified, shows he has a great deal of slow twitch muscle fibers which contract slowly but keep going over a long period of time. Fast twitch muscle fibers are usually initiated during short bursts of high intensity muscular contractions, such as sprinting, whereas slow twitch muscle fibers are usually initiated over long periods of low intensity aerobic muscular activity. In terms of the player's agility, the Illinois agility test is a fitness test designed to test one's sporting agility. It is a simple test which is easy to administer and requires little equipment and doesn't take up much time. It tests the ability to turn in different directions and at different angles. The muscular power side of weakness. Muscular strength is the ability. Muscular strength is separate from muscular power. Muscular strength is the ability to expend a maximal amount of energy in one or a series of strong, sudden, high-intensity movements, or apply a successive and equal force equally. Jumping to head the ball would be an example of this type of strength. The second category of weaknesses is the player's skills. His heading is a weakness. He often cannot reach high ball headers. This is linked to muscular power in his legs. The inability to reach these headers led to major attacks from goal. Another weakness was his passing. He rarely passes the ball. He would rather clear the ball. Which was a strength we identified earlier. He also has inaccurate passes, and they're often intercepted. And another weakness was his tackling. He had a reckless technique in his tackling. The tackles were borderline illegal. I felt he was too predetermined to slide as opposed to use his size to outmuscle smaller players. His size was something that we identified earlier as a strength. He didn't utilise that. And this weakness can be seen at the foul and resulting penalty at 53 minutes and 25 seconds. This penalty led to the second goal by Glenn. In terms of theory, for heading, the inability to head the ball is not due to heading technique, as his flat foot heading was good. He had good technique when it came to that. However, he is unable to reach the high ball or the high through balls and crosses because he is unable to generate enough explosive power in his legs to jump high enough and head the ball. In terms of the player's passing, I used the arousal theory, or the theories of arousal, to explain this. The second theory of arousal, the inverted U theory, so just like that, states that we all have our own zone of optimum functioning, and this is usually seen as the peak of the inverted U. So you have performance going down the y-axis and arousal going down the x-axis, and this is usually seen as a crescent, the inverted U. And basically the zone of optimal functioning would be at the top where that arc peaks, I guess. The theory states that arousal levels, both sides of the peak, leads to lower levels of performance. So very high arousal leads to bad performance, and low levels of arousal leads to bad performance. However, not everyone's zone is in the same place, as the theory would tend to state. The player has already exhibited type A personality traits, which would class him as an extrovert. Extroverts usually negatively or react negatively to high levels of arousal, which may explain his lack of performance when it comes to the precise art of passing. The theory also takes the idea of a steady decline in performance when arousal increases even more. This has been proven wrong, and the catastrophe theory of arousal, which I will speak in the next few minutes, is usually a better explanation for explaining arousal relationships to performance. In terms of the player's tackling, his poor technique could be is most likely due to the poor teaching of a skill. The learning of a skill is split into three stages. The cognitive stage. During the planning stage, you break the skill down into preparation, action, and recovery. Attempts are made at learning these stages. Mistakes are often common, and lots of feedback is required. Feedback is key from the coaches. The next stage, the second stage, is the associative stage. This is when a player combines subroutines of skills. The performer's ability and experience will determine the practice time required, and repeated practices make the performer more consistent. The final stage of learning is the autonomous stage. This is when the player is able to perform the skill naturally and without conscious thought. Good teaching of a skill involves verbal and visual guidance. Verbal and visual guidance could be in the form of a demonstration, a tackling demonstration to the team of how to slide tackle properly or how to standing tackle properly. The final category of weaknesses, tactics. This begins with his decision making. He often makes the wrong decision in key situations. He's too aggressive. There's a difference between aggression and assertion. He may have a full sense of security due to his size, and this can be seen at the opposition goal at 6:03. Because at 6:03, a player or a ball is played over the top, and instead of dropping back and dealing with the player with the ball, he tries to head the ball before the ball can get to the player. But this over-aggression leads to an attack on goal and ultimately leads to a goal. The second weakness in terms of tactics is his off-ball movement. He's often found pressing too high on attacks, especially at set pieces, because of he's often utilised in the opposition box, especially on corners and free kicks. This leads to vulnerability in the defence and is made worse by a lack of catch-up speed and agility, weaknesses that we identified earlier. And the final weakness is his composure. He shows a lack of composure at both opposition's goals. And a lack of composure could be due to the large media presence at the game, because not only are there crowds of his friends, there's also obviously cameramen, media men, all of that. In terms of theory, in terms of his decision making, the player's poor decision making could be a result of social inhibition. Social inhibition is when a performance is made worse due to the large presence of spectators, the crowd and the media. This can also be linked to the catastrophe theory of arousal. The catastrophe theory of arousal employs the idea that people go to pieces in big moments, with performance rising until a certain or a sudden moment, and then after this, the performance just completely plummets. It could also be linked with the player's personality type, as an extrovert is more likely to be affected by high levels of arousal and go to pieces. In terms of his off-ball movement, a lack of discipline and self-control led to the player drifting out of position and getting sucked into wide-out play. This led to several passes being led into the space he had left, and consequently led to several attacks. An explanation for this behaviour could be the Ringelmann effect. The Ringelmann effect is the tendency for individual members of a group to become increasingly less productive as the size of their group, in this case a team, increases. And this is due to social loafing, the theory of social loafing. And social loafing is when a team player loses the motivation to work as hard because their efforts aren't as recognised because they're in a much larger team game. And as a result, their motivation decreases and their performance also decreases. In terms of the player's composure, the added pressure of a crowd of peers and colleagues, as well as the large media presence, could have led to social inhibition. Media in sport has only become prevalent over the past 30 years. Media acts as the informative gateway between sport and the public. The positives of media in sport include the fact it can lead to sponsorship, promotion and globalisation of sport. Negatives of media in sport include the issues of gambling, scandal, betting, and in this player's case, the added pressure of a media presence towards players and officials due to scrutiny of pundits, action replay, instant replay, goal line technology, can lead to a decrease in performance due to a build-up of pressure. So after analysing the player's performance, these are the strengths and weaknesses I have found. From this, his overall performance, or his overall effectiveness of performance, he is inconsistent at centre back. He's good at shutting down normal attacks and set pieces due to height and strength. However, he struggles at defending counter attacks due to poor tactics and a lack of agility and speed. He's directly responsible for his team's only 2 goals due to poor tackling technique and poor decision making. He's partly attributed to his team's first goal due to size, as in he's partly attributed to his team scoring their first goal due to his size and attraction of defenders on set pieces. Although his flat-footed heading technique is good, lack of muscular power in his legs to reach the highest balls is a problem. He gave up several counter-attacks due to this, and his personality type did not mix relatively well with the pressure and magnitude of the stage, which led him to make several key mental errors. His prioritised weaknesses, I noticed that his speed. His speed must improve to keep up with the fast pace of play. This will help him develop his tactics when defending counter-attacks by having the speed to catch up with the attackers. His tackling. Poor tackling technique was the direct cause of his team's penalty because he slid in illegally and it was a foul. Developing how to tackle properly would benefit him at most being a centre-back. And his decision making, one of the most sought after characteristics of a centre-back is being able to make the right decision in a multitude of situations. Developing this would benefit not only him but his team also. And finally, muscular power in his lower body, his legs. The inability to generate enough power and reach high through balls was the cause of several attacks by the opposition. Developing this aspect of fitness would also help develop his heading. The weakness I have decided to choose and take to an action plan would be developing his muscular power in his legs. This would be best suited to his somatotype, his somatotype being a mesomorph, as developing speed would not be as easy to develop because he's quite large and bulky. Upon analysis, heading was also a weakness. Developing muscular power in the player's legs would in turn develop his heading also. And the inability to reach the high through balls was the direct cause of several major attacks by the opposition. Strengthening the player's lower body would also consolidate his already powerful upper body strength, meaning he will be a solid unit to get past in all aspects. So, the action plan. Timescale, I'll use a 2-month timescale, or 8 weeks, in every week, so repetitively. And there will be a gym session for increasing his raw strength on Tuesdays and Fridays. There will be a separate gym session on Thursdays. This will be plyometrics as opposed to developing his strength. He will also obviously still participate in a football game every Sunday. Each strength session, so the sessions on Tuesday and Fridays, will last around an hour with 2-minute workouts split between 4-minute intervals of rest. And then each high intensity plyometric session will last around 45 minutes. In terms of justification of theory when it comes to timescale, I use the use of macro, meso and micro cycles in goal settings, or long-term, medium and short-term goal settings if you want the opposing alternative wording. His macro cycle goal, so a long-term goal, will be to increase his vertical jump by 8 inches. His vertical jump will be the measure of progression and his testing for his muscular power in his legs. That will be conducted every week as a gauge of how well he's doing, if he needs to up his game or perhaps rein it back a bit. His mesocycle goal each week, so the medium term goal, would be to increase his vertical jump by approximately 1 inch each week. So over eight weeks, he will increase his. So over an 8-week period, with an inch improvement every week, he will get 8 inches by the end of those 8 weeks. And his microcycle goal, or short-term goal, will be to increase the weight, intensity, or speed of exercises. I will also use the training principle, sport fit, specific to the player's needs, progressive, so use actually comes out of the training program. Overload, this is to enable progression to be made. Regression means that he won't decrease in what he's achieved, and then the type of exercises should be suited to what he's trying to achieve. So you wouldn't be doing aerobic capacity exercises to increase his muscular power in his legs, and the frequency of exercising, the intensity of exercising, and the time of exercising. We should also take into account the principle of moderation, because obviously you don't want to be doing so much that you injure yourself, because that will set back the action plan quite a lot. The use of goal setting maintains motivation and reduces the risk of tedium and regression in players. And rest days, because you've always got to have a rest day, at least twice a week. Rest days promote rest and recovery for muscles, obviously, and I put rest days on Saturdays and Mondays. This is before and after a game day. This is to make sure he is at his maximum potential on a Sunday when he plays a game, because obviously you wouldn't want to be fatigued the night before a game, because then your performance won't be as good. And also the day after a game, the high intensity nature of a game, you'll need to recover after that as well. In terms of progressive practices, each Tuesday and Friday gym session focusing on increasing strength will involve contractions such as leg press to develop his quadriceps, hamstring curl to develop his hamstring strength, and calf raises for his calf muscles. Strength training will involve 3 sets of 5 reps. 10 kilograms will be added to the weight once the athlete is able to complete all 15 reps, 3 sets of 5, in each individual workout. If the athlete cannot complete 15 reps within 3 gym sessions, they may have plateaued and will need to decrease in the weight. This should develop raw strength. Each Thursday session will consist of plyometric training. This will involve 5 circuits of 12 box jumps, 24 bench hops, and 24 squat thrusts with a 30-second interval between each section. This is high intensity. Each week the box height will increase by 3 inches. The bench hopping will increase in speed, and the squat thrusts each week 1 kilogram weight will be added to almost as a weighted squat. Each Sunday before a competitive game, the athlete's vertical jump will be measured. This should increase by approximately 1 inch every time, with a final goal of approximately 8 inches higher than his first vertical jump measured before the action plan. So he should be 8 inch. So his vertical jump should have improved 8 inches after the action plan from his original vertical jump. An athlete's actual performance will be measured in a game situation, because obviously it's all well and good having all this development in terms of his anatomy, but if he can't transfer this to a game time situation, then the action plan hasn't really been effective. And this will lead on to direct feedback and guidance in the form of coaching points. The vertical jump is a measure of explosive power in the legs. In terms of justification with the theory for the progressive practices, maximum strength, what he's focusing on Tuesdays and Fridays, is the ability to produce a maximal amount of force in a single muscular contraction. Dynamic movements are better suited as they involve the lengthening, eccentric, and shortening concentric movement of the muscles, which cause more muscular tension. Maximum strength will involve 3 sets of 5 reps at a high intensity, that's 85 to 95% intensity, due to the high weight. The increase of 10 kilograms each week promotes overload and progression. This causes muscle fibers to tear and damage. Rest days between Tuesday and Friday will allow muscles to repair or replace damaged muscle fibers through a cellular process where it fuses muscle fibers together to form new muscle protein strands or myofibrils. These repaired myofibrils increase in thickness and number and hence increase the muscle strength. Tapering is maintaining the intensity but decreasing the volume of training. In this case, the volume is the weight of the exercises. The use of smart training principle, specific to what the player is needing to improve on, So it's specific in the sense that developing muscular power in his legs is specific to him generating enough power in his legs to head the ball, which is what we need to improve on. Measurable, obviously the vertical jump test is a good measurable way of increasing his progression in terms of muscular power, especially in the lower body. Attainable, I haven't set him a goal of increasing his vertical jump by 2 feet, because that is quite impossible over an 8-week period, especially due to his young age. Redoable relates to the fact that all of the data produced can be redone again, if that makes sense, to increase validity of data. I forgot what T was. I apologise. Sorry about that. Plyometrics is a series of explosive exercises such as hopping, bounding and jumping to improve the speed at which a muscle shortens. The eccentric contraction stores elastic energy, which is then released to create a more powerful concentric contraction. The neuromuscular system is stimulated to adapt, recruiting more motor units and initiates a stretch reflex. This is vital for developing jumping height for football. A stretch reflex is a protective mechanism which causes a muscle to concentrically contract in response to being overstretched. By increasing the height, speed and weight of the plyometric exercises will increase the stretch reflex of a muscle. The best test for measuring explosive strength is the vertical jump test. It is the act of raising one's centre of mass higher in the vertical plane solely with the use of one's own muscles, and this test is easy to conduct with minimal equipment. Finally, the coaching points. To ensure the maximum increase in muscular contraction for the strength training exercises, the downward motion of contraction should last up to 3 seconds. Plyometric exercises should be fast, explosive, and never decrease in intensity. The vertical jump test should be jumped straight out of your shoes. Dynamic stretches should be used both before and after training, and cooling aids should be used after every high intensity muscle activity. If the athlete is exceeding his goals, then the intensity, the weight, speed, height of the exercises should be increased. This maintains motivation and makes sure tedium does not become a factor. In terms of the justification for this theory, the eccentric motion of the strength exercises involves the lengthening of the agonist muscle. The longer the time under tension, the higher the damage/tear to the muscle. This will lead to a higher strength development. Plyometrics must be of high intensity, because the higher the elastic energy, the greater the concentric contraction, and therefore the greater the stretch reflex. The vertical jump test should be straight out of the shoes, as a one-step jump would not truly measure lower body explosiveness and would be heavily influenced by the kinetic energy of taking the one step. Dynamic stretches. The technique which involves taking a joint through its full range of motion with control over the entry and exit of the stretch. Not only does this actively mobilize the muscles before activity, it also aids recovery by flushing the muscle with lactic acid. And this also links to cooling aids. Cooling aids are a range of products used to reduce core temperature and promote recovery. The aims of this action plan is to develop the player's muscular power in his lower body. This will in turn allow him to generate enough power to jump high enough and uses heading technique to deter some of the more air sort of related attacks on a football field, and this should ultimately lead to an increase in his performance. Thank you. I'm Sam McCarthy, or Hello School, candidate number 58331. Candidates